The sound came before the pain. A sharp crack. Glass exploding across the kitchen floor. I looked down as blood slid between my toes. Warm against the cold tile. My hands did not shake. My heart did not race. The house stayed perfectly quiet, like it was holding its breath. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere. A dog barked. Life kept moving. My name is Elena Brooks. I am 31 years old. And 3 months after my divorce, my ex-mother-in-law called demanding $42,000 to save the man who betrayed me, broke me, and threw me out into the rain with our child. The phone vibrated again in my palm. But what they did not know was this time, I was no longer the woman. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. Are you alone in your room, riding the bus home, or listening late at night when the house is finally quiet? And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Not by strangers, but by the people who were supposed to protect you. This story isn't about drama for shock. It's about what happens when a woman stops apologizing for surviving. I still remember the first time I stood in front of Margaret Cole's front door. The brass knocker cold against my palm. The porch smelled like wet pine after the sprinklers. And the windows were so spotless they reflected my face back at me like a warning. Nathan squeezed my fingers and smiled. That soft, practiced smile that made strangers trust him. I was 25 and convinced love could turn any house into a home. Inside, the air was too perfect. Like lemon polish and expensive candles. Margaret appeared in the hallway wearing pearls in the middle of a Tuesday. Her hair sprayed into place like she expected a camera crew. She kissed Nathan's cheek and looked at me the way you look at a scratch on a new car. "Elena," she said, as if testing the sound. Her living room was bright and cold. All glass and sharp corners. I didn't know it then. But that bright room would become the stage where I learned how invisible a woman can be. The first months of marriage felt like walking on a rug that could be yanked at any second. Margaret insisted we move into the suburban house outside Denver until you two are stable. Nathan framed it as help. It'll be temporary. He whispered into my hair at night. But temporary turned into routine. And routine turned into rules. There was always a list on the fridge in Margaret's neat handwriting. Wipe the counters twice. Fold towels the hotel way. No shoes past the foyer. Smile when guests arrive. On our wedding night, before I even took my pins out, Margaret called me into her office. The room smelled like paper and lavender sachets. The kind that make you feel guilty for breathing wrong. She slid a folder across the desk. "Family finances," she said, tapping the pages with a manicured nail. "Nathan works hard. You work hard. But young couples make bad decisions. I'll manage it. You'll sign a limited power of attorney. It's simple." My mouth went dry. I looked at Nathan, hoping he'd laugh and tell her it was a joke. He didn't. He stared at the carpet and murmured, "It'll keep things smooth." Babe. I didn't know it then, but that signature was the first chain around my ankle. After that, my paycheck stopped feeling like mine. Every Friday the deposit hit, and every Friday I withdrew it and handed it over like I was dropping off contraband. Margaret kept a small metal safe in her closet. I heard the click of the combination through the thin walls at night, like a lock closing on my life. In the mornings, she handed me a crisp $20 bill and said, "Groceries. Be smart. $20 to feed 3 adults in a house that looked like a magazine spread." Some days I stretched it with rice and soup, pretending I wasn't hungry. When the air outside smelled like snow and the sidewalks were slick, I walked through the discount aisle counting pennies in my head, cheeks burning, palms sweating inside my gloves. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. I kept working anyway. Senior marketing strategist. Big title. Long hours. Meetings that smelled like burnt coffee and dry erase markers. In the office, I spoke with confidence, built campaigns, watched numbers climb. On the drive home, the sunset would bleed orange across the Rockies, and I would practice my smile in the rearview mirror. Because the moment I opened Margaret's door, my voice had to shrink. "How was work?" she'd ask without looking up from her tablet. If I mentioned a win, She'd nod once and say, "Just don't forget your real job is this family." I didn't know it then, but she was training me to doubt my own value. When I got pregnant with Lily, I thought the baby would soften everything. The first time I heard the heartbeat, quick and frantic like tiny wings, I cried in the parking lot with my hands on my belly. Margaret came to one appointment and acted sweet in front of the nurse, calling me dear and adjusting my scarf. The second we were alone, she said, "Let's hope it's a boy. Nathan needs a legacy." My stomach tightened at the gender reveal. When pink confetti fell, she clapped twice and smiled like someone losing a bet. Later I heard her on the phone, voice low and sharp. "A girl. Again these days you never know what you get." I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. Lily arrived on a windy night, the hospital room lit in harsh, fluorescent white. Nathan held my hand for the first hour. Then his phone buzzed and he stepped into the hallway. I listened to his voice through the curtain, calm and soothing, but not for me. When the nurse placed Lily on my chest, she was warm and slick and perfect, her tiny fist curling around my finger like she was anchoring me to the world. Nathan came back, kissed Lily's forehead, and took a photo, not of me, just the baby. I didn't know it then, but that missing photo would explain so much later. 2 years passed in a blur of daycare drop-offs, late-night emails, and Margaret's constant inspections. She would run her finger along the baseboards and hold up the dust like evidence. Nathan learned to play both sides. With her, he was the dutiful son. With me, he was the tired husband. He started saying things like, "Don't make my mom upset, and you know how she is," as if her cruelty was weather, unavoidable. I tried to keep the peace for Lily. I tried to be the kind of mother who didn't flinch when a door slammed. The first time I suspected another woman, it was something small. Nathan's cologne changed. A sharper scent, almost metallic, like fresh shaving cream and lies. He began taking calls outside, even when it was freezing, breath turning to fog on the porch. One night, I reached for his phone to check the time, and he snatched it back too fast. "Privacy," he said, smiling like I was silly. My chest tightened. I didn't know it then, but my instinct was already screaming the truth. It was a Thursday in late spring when I saw the message by accident. Lily was coloring at the kitchen table, and Margaret was watching a cooking show. Volume too loud. Nathan's phone lit up on the counter. One line, "Our baby needs his father tonight." A name I didn't recognize. Vanessa. My fingers went numb. The room smelled like garlic and dish soap, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. Margaret laughed at something on TV and the sound made my skin crawl. I set the phone back exactly where it was and washed my hands until they burned. In the mirror, my eyes looked older. I told myself to breathe, to smile, to wait. Later would matter so much too. I waited 3 days before I touched his phone again. Not because I was calm, but because I was scared of what I'd find. Fear makes you polite in your own home. It makes you fold laundry slowly, kiss your child's forehead longer, and pretend the tightness in your throat is nothing. Sunday night, Nathan fell asleep to the TV's blue flicker, one hand on his chest like he was innocent. I slid the phone off the nightstand like it was a live wire. The passcode was Lily's birthday. That detail hurt more than the messages. A thread with Vanessa Reed opened, and my body went cold. Hearts, pet names, a hotel mirror photo of Nathan in a towel, grinning like a man with no consequences. A selfie of Vanessa in a silk robe, lips glossy, hand on a barely rounded belly. Under it she'd typed, "Tell your mom thanks for covering the deposit." I didn't know it then, but that sentence proved Margaret wasn't just aware. She was involved. I put the phone back and lay staring at the ceiling fan, turning slow circles. The air smelled like stale popcorn and the lavender plug-in Margaret insisted on, as if scent could erase sin. In the morning, Margaret complained the pancakes were too pale. Nathan kissed my cheek and asked if I slept okay. The lie of tenderness almost made me gag. Lily swung her legs on her booster seat, humming, safe inside her little world. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. After that, I started collecting evidence the way I used to build marketing strategies, one clean data point at a time. I pulled statements from our accounts and found withdrawals on the same nights Nathan claimed he was at client dinners. I photographed Margaret's closet safe when she left the door cracked. I wrote dates in my notes app, then emailed them to myself from a burner address. I didn't know it back then, but the patience they forced on me was becoming my weapon. A few weeks later, Margaret hosted Sunday brunch and invited Vanessa over. She introduced her as a friend from church. But Vanessa's eyes landed on Nathan with the calm confidence of ownership. Her perfume was sugary and sharp, like fruit left too long in the sun. Lily ran up for a hug, and Vanessa stepped back as if my child was messy. Margaret laughed and squeezed Vanessa's arm. "She's not used to little ones," she said, then added toward me, soft and cruel. "Some women are meant for more." That afternoon, Nathan cornered me in the pantry. Shelves lined with cheap cans I stretched into meals with my $20 budgets. "Don't get weird," he said. "My mom likes her. She's helping with something." I stared at him, waiting for guilt. Nothing. Only annoyance. Like I was a bill he didn't want to pay. I realized then he wasn't being stolen. He was volunteering. Later would matter so much, because it told me who he really was. The first time he hit me, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, and that was worse. It happened in the garage, cold concrete under my feet, the smell of motor oil and old cardboard thick in the air. I asked about a $3.500 transfer into an account under Vanessa's name. Nathan laughed once. "Sharp. You wouldn't understand," he said. When I insisted, he shoved me into the workbench. Pain shot through my shoulder, and I tasted blood where my teeth cut my lip. He leaned close. "Lower your voice," he whispered. "Unless you want it worse." I stared at the dent and understood bruises could be used like signatures in this house here. After that, Margaret planted a new story. Not cheating, not money, me. She mentioned postpartum hormones at dinner. Sweet as syrup. She left brochures on the counter about anxiety and mood disorders. She asked Lily, in that sing-song voice. If Mommy cried a lot or forgot things, Lily would frown and say, "Mommy's tired." Each time. The kitchen felt smaller, the lights harsher, the air thinner. I didn't know it then, but they were building a case, not a marriage. The night everything snapped open was the night the sky tore apart. Rain slammed the windows. Thunder rolled so close the glass vibrated. Nathan didn't come home until after midnight, soaked, reeking of liquor and that same sugary perfume. Lily woke up crying. I carried her down the hallway, whispering, "It's just rain. Baby." Nathan looked at us like we were inconveniences. "Put her back," he snapped. "I have a headache." "I have a question," I said, voice shaking. "Where were you?" He stepped toward me, eyes glassy. "Don't start," he warned. Margaret appeared in her robe, pearls still around her neck like she slept dressed for court. "Elena, stop making scenes," she said. I stared at her. "He's cheating," I said. "He's spending my money on her." The silence was heavy. Then Margaret smiled, thin and satisfied. "Of course he is," she said. "A man seeks what he needs. You gave him a girl. Vanessa is giving him a boy." I didn't know it then, but she was already writing my obituary. Something in me shifted, not into hysteria, into clarity. I carried Lily back to her room, tucked her in, and held her hand until her breathing slowed. She whispered, "Mommy." "Don't go." My throat tightened. "I'm not going anywhere," I promised. I didn't know it then, but that promise would drag me through every courthouse hallway later. When I stepped back into the hall, Nathan blocked the bedroom doorway. "Give me your phone," he said. "My mom thinks you've been recording." I held my ground. "No." He grabbed my wrist, hard enough that bone scraped bone. "You're making this hard," he said. Then his hand crossed my face. Not full force. Enough to humiliate. Enough to warn. The sound was dull, like a book slapped on a table. My cheek burned. I tasted iron. Margaret opened the front door. Cold air rushed in. Wet grass and lightning. "Pack a bag," she said. "Go to your parents if you want to act unstable." My mind raced. Lily. I ran to her room, grabbed her jacket, her stuffed bunny, my laptop, and the folder of documents I kept hidden. Nathan followed, snarling. "You're not taking anything valuable." Margaret's eyes gleamed. "Leave the checkbook," she said. "Leave the jewelry. You didn't earn it." Outside. Rain soaked my hair in seconds. My shoes slipped on the driveway. Margaret tossed my suitcase onto the porch like trash. Nathan slammed the door so hard the windows rattled. I stood there with Lily clinging to my neck, her sobs muffled against my shoulder. And that warm house glowed behind the glass like a lie I'd been paid to believe. The street smelled like wet asphalt and pine. A neighbor's porch light flicked on. Then off. No one came out. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. The first hearing felt like stepping into a freezer after being drenched in rain. The courthouse smelled like paper and coffee, and every bench creaked like it was judging me. Margaret arrived in a tailored coat, pearls bright as teeth. Nathan came beside her, calm, holding a folder like a shield. He didn't look at Lily once. He looked at the clock, at the judge, at me, like I was a delay in his schedule. Their attorney called me emotionally unstable, with a smile that never reached his eyes. He said I had mood swings. He said I had no independent savings and no stable residence, even though I was sleeping in my childhood bedroom with Lily's shoes lined up by the door. When I tried to speak, Margaret leaned close and whispered, "Don't embarrass yourself." The mediator asked if we could be reasonable. I nodded, because I'd learned reasonable women survive longer. I left that room tasting metal and hearing my pulse in ears. 2 days later, my bank card declined at the grocery store. Lily was humming in the cart, asking for cereal for her, while the lights buzzed overhead. The screen flashed insufficient funds in red. Nathan froze our joint account the moment I left, and Margaret would call it financial protection. I paid with the emergency 20 I kept tucked inside my phone case and walked out with one bag. In the parking lot, Lily asked, "Mommy, are we in trouble?" I told her no, and hated myself for lying. That night, Nathan texted me a picture of a new lock on the suburban house. Under it, he wrote, "You can't just come take things." Lily's winter coat was there. My laptop charger was there. And the folder with my certifications was there. He wasn't protecting the house. He was erasing evidence that I ever belonged there. One object at a time. I didn't know it back then, but this would matter later, when he claimed I had nothing to my name. Margaret escalated the way she always did, wrapped in sweetness. She sent my parents a fruit basket with a note that said, "Praying for Elena's recovery." The next morning, my mother played a voicemail, Margaret's voice trembling like she cared. "I'm worried she's not well," she said. "I just want the child safe." Hearing my daughter called, the child sounded polite. It was a knife. I thanked my mother, went to the bathroom, and stared at my reflection until my eyes went dry. A week later, Child Protective Services knocked on my parents' door. The woman's badge caught the light. Her tone was professional. "We received a concern," she said, scanning the living room like love could be measured in square footage. Lily sat on the carpet coloring, unaware. When the worker left, she handed me a case number and a pamphlet about postpartum instability. I watched her car disappear and realized Margaret wasn't trying to win a divorce. She was trying to stamp me with a label and hand it to a judge later. At work, my manager pulled me into a glass conference room. "Elena, are you okay?" he asked. Someone had emailed HR claiming I was having a breakdown and shouldn't handle accounts. My cheeks burned with shame. Marketing is built on perception, and Margaret knew exactly where to aim. I delivered my presentation anyway, voice steady, palms pressed under the table to hide the tremor. I won the client. Then I cried in my car until my ribs ached. Because success doesn't stop someone from trying to erase you. Nathan's next move was Lily. He showed up at my parents' house unannounced with a stuffed bear and a practiced smile. Lily ran to him out of habit, then slowed when she saw my face. Nathan knelt and said, "Daddy misses you." Then he looked at me and lowered his voice. "You're making this ugly," he said. "Mom says, if you cooperate, we can keep this quiet." Quiet. Like my pain was an inconvenience. Lily hugged the bear and whispered, "Are we going home?" My heart cracked, because I didn't know what home meant anymore at all. That night, I opened my laptop and started building my case the way I built Campaign's timeline. Receipts, screenshots, witnesses, patterns. I requested full bank statements. I emailed my therapist for records to prove I sought help by choice, not because I was unfit. I opened a new account in my name only. I didn't know it then, but every document I saved was a stitch, closing the wound they kept ripping open. When Margaret's lawyer offered a generous settlement that gave Nathan custody and gave me weekends, I stared at the paper until the letters blurred. Margaret leaned in and said softly, "You can still be part of her life, if you behave." My hands went cold. The room felt smaller, and I realized my biggest fear wasn't losing money. It was watching my daughter grow up, learning that her mother's love was negotiable. The next week, Margaret arrived at my parents' kitchen table with a church smile and a legal folder. She sat down like the chair belonged to her. "Elena," she said, sweet as syrup, "we can settle this without dragging Lily through court." Nathan hovered behind her, hands in pockets, eyes empty. Margaret slid a paper toward me. It was a parenting plan with supervised visits, 2 hours on Saturdays, and Margaret listed as the supervisor. "You want me supervised by you," I said. Margaret shrugged. "You've been stressed. This keeps things calm." Nathan whispered, "Just sign it." "Lena." My mother's chair scraped back. "Get out," she said. Margaret's smile didn't move. Her eyes flicked to me like a verdict. Nathan looked away. And the old wound opened. I was still the easy one to sacrifice. 2 days later, Nathan showed up in my office lobby. Security called because he refused to leave. I rode down with my stomach tight. He stood there with a grocery store bouquet, cellophane crackling. "I just want to talk," he announced, loud enough for strangers to hear. Heads turned. He wanted witnesses. Outside, the wind cut hard. Nathan leaned close. "Mom says you're embarrassing us," he muttered. "You could make this smooth." "You mean quiet," I said. He flinched. "You're making me choose." "You already did," I said, and walked back inside without taking the flowers. The sting wasn't his voice. It was the audience he tried to build around my pain. The next afternoon, Margaret hit me from another angle. She called my HR department pretending to verify benefits. My manager pulled me into a glass room. "Elena, is someone harassing you?" he asked. My cheeks burned. I hated being a problem people had to manage. Minutes later, Nathan called. "Your mom contacted my job," I said. "She's worried," he replied, like worry excused everything. "You're letting her build a file on me." I said, "Silence." Then he sighed. "Maybe if you weren't so intense." After years of swallowing, he was still calling me too much. I swallowed it, and it carved deeper than I thought. On Saturday at Lily's custody exchange, Vanessa finally stepped into the daylight. Beige trench coat, hair perfect, belly barely showing. She smiled at Lily first. "Hi, sweetheart." Stickers. Lily glanced at me. Margaret's car idled behind them. Vanessa turned to me. "Elena, right? Nathan just wants peace," she said. "Then tell him to stop sending his mother to do his dirty work," I said. Vanessa's phone angled in her palm. Recording. Nathan stepped in. "Lena, don't start." I knelt and adjusted Lily's backpack. "Go have fun," I whispered. As Lily walked away, Vanessa leaned closer. "See, we can be civil," she murmured, like civility was a leash. I watched my daughter climb into their car, and the parking lot felt cold. I swallowed it, and it carved deeper than I thought. That Friday, Lily came home from Nathan's visit too quiet. She lined her stuffed animals into a straight row and asked, "Mommy, do you get mad a lot?" My throat tightened. "Why, Grandma Margaret said if you get mad, the judge will send me to Daddy forever." Then she added, small and careful. She said Daddy's new friend is nicer than you, Vanessa. Sliding into my child's world like smoke, I kissed Lily's forehead and promised, "No one replaces your mom." But when I turned off the light, the dark felt heavier than it should have. I swallowed it, and it carved deeper than I thought. On Monday, my inbox filled with poison. Nathan's attorney emailed photos of me outside a coffee shop with my coworker Jason. In one shot, he handed me a folder. In another, we laughed at his phone. That was it. Work, but the subject line called it evidence. Then my phone buzzed with an unknown text. "Moms like you don't deserve daughters." My hands shook, not from fear, but from the sick certainty that Margaret wasn't just fighting for custody. She was trying to erase me. That night, rain tapped the window like impatient fingers. A deputy knocked and handed my father papers. Nathan had filed for emergency custody, claiming I was emotionally volatile. Margaret's handwriting sat on the affidavit like a signature in blood. Lily peeked from the hallway, blanket in her fists. "Mom, am I leaving?" she whispered. "No," I said, steady. "You're staying." At dawn, my lawyer Dana met me in a courthouse hallway that smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. "They want you to break," she said. "Don't." In court, Nathan's lawyer called me unstable. Dana laid down receipts, medical notes, and Jason's statement. Then she asked Margaret one question. "Did you talk to a 5-year-old about court to scare her?" Margaret blinked. I encouraged stability. The judge denied the emergency request. Margaret brushed past me afterward and whispered, "You can win papers. You'll never win my son back." I held Lily's hand tighter, because the real fight wasn't about him anymore. It was about my right to exist without begging, and that truth burned worse than any bruise. The call came on a Tuesday morning, sharp and uninvited. Cutting through the quiet hum of my office like a blade, I was standing by the window, coffee cooling in my hand, watching traffic crawl below when my phone lit up with a number I hadn't saved but knew by heart. Margaret Cole. I let it ring twice longer than necessary before answering. Elena. Her voice was strained, breathy, stripped of its usual authority. Behind it, I heard beeping. Hospital beeping. "You need to come to Metropolitan General. Now." I said nothing. "Nathan's been in an accident." She rushed on. "Car crash. It's serious. They're taking him into surgery. They need $42,000 up front or they won't proceed." I closed my eyes. The smell of disinfectant seemed to seep through the phone. "I don't understand," I said calmly. "Why are you calling me?" A pause. Then anger flared, desperate and ugly. "Don't play games. He's your husband." "No," I corrected. "He's not." Another pause. Longer this time. "You're Lily's mother," she snapped. "You can't let her father die." That was the moment something cold and precise settled in my chest. Not rage, not fear. Clarity. "I'll come," I said, "but not for the reason you think." The ICU hallway was a narrow tunnel of fluorescent light and stale air. Machines hissed and clicked. Nurses moved fast, eyes tired. Margaret sat hunched on a plastic chair, coat wrinkled, pearls gone. She looked smaller than I remembered, like her spine had folded inward. When she saw me, she stood too fast and grabbed my arm. "You brought the money?" she asked, eyes searching my face like a scanner. I gently removed her hand. "No." Her face collapsed. "Then why are you here?" "To see the truth," I said. She stared at me, disbelief giving way to fury. "You heartless woman, he's dying in there. How can you stand there so calm?" "Because I've already survived what he did to me," I replied. "This is not new pain for me." A doctor approached, mask hanging loose around his neck. "Family of Nathan Cole." Margaret surged forward. Yes, I'm his mother." The doctor glanced between us. We stabilized him. "Internal bleeding controlled, but there's significant brain trauma. even if he survives surgery. The likelihood of severe cognitive impairment is high, possibly permanent. The words landed heavy, vegetative. Lifelong care. The unspoken costs hung in the air. Margaret swayed, gripping the chair. "You have to help me," she whispered, turning back to me. "Please. I'll do anything. I was wrong. I admit it." I studied her face. The lines carved deep by years of control and certainty, now cracked with fear. "You want money," I said, "not forgiveness." She dropped to her knees. The sound echoed down the hallway, plastic against tile. A nurse gasped. Someone whispered, "I beg you." Margaret sobbed, clutching my coat. I raised him alone. "He's all I have. I was wrong to you." "Wrong. I'll make it right. I'll give you everything back." I looked down at her hands. These were the hands that counted my grocery bills. That shoved me into the rain. That signed affidavits calling me unstable. "Get up," I said quietly. She didn't. I said, "Get up." She shook her head, tears soaking the floor. "Please." I took a step back. "Margaret," I said, voice steady, "do you know what you took from me?" She sobbed harder. "Money. Pride. I know." "No." I said, "You tried to take my daughter." That made her freeze. "You tried to teach Lily that her mother was disposable, that love was conditional, that obedience mattered more than safety." She whispered, "I was protecting my family." "No," I said, "you were protecting power." She looked up, eyes wild. "You think you're better than us now, with your job, your suits." "No," I replied, "I think I'm done bleeding for people who wouldn't bleed for me." Her mouth trembled. "Then save him for Lily." That was the knife, the one she'd been saving. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. "You want to talk about Lily?" I asked. "Let's talk about the baby." Her breath hitched. I opened the file my investigator sent me weeks ago. Our photos, messages, medical records. "This is Vanessa," I said, holding the screen close. "And this is the man she was with 6 months ago. Married, wealthy, not Nathan." Margaret squinted, confused. "The ultrasound date." I continued, scrolling. 22 weeks. Do the math. Her lips parted. "And these messages," I added, voice flat. "He's easy. His mom wants a grandson so bad she'll do anything." And to staunted pain, Margaret's face drained of color. "No," she whispered. She said, "She promised, she lied." I said, "Nathan wasn't chasing love. He was chasing an illusion you fed him." Margaret let out a sound I'd never heard before. Raw. Animal. She collapsed sideways, hands clutching her chest. "My son," she cried. "I destroyed my son." A nurse rushed over, but Margaret waved her off weakly. I stood there, watching the truth dismantle her piece by piece. "I won't pay the $42,000, I said softly. "That money is Lily's future. But I won't leave you with nothing." She looked up, hollow. I handed her a card. "This is a medical aid foundation my company supports. I'll make a call. They may help cover part of the costs." "Not all." And not quietly. She clutched the card like it was oxygen. "Why?" she asked hoarsely. "Why help at all?" "Because I don't want Lily to grow up thinking cruelty is strength," I said. "And because mercy with boundaries is still mercy." The doctor returned. "We're taking him in now." Margaret's shoulders shook as they wheeled Nathan past. Tubes everywhere. Eyes closed. Face slack. I watched without hatred, without satisfaction, just finality. When I turned to leave, Margaret whispered my name. "Elena." I paused. "I'm sorry," she said. "Truly." I nodded once. Not forgiveness. Closure. Then I walked out of the ICU. Heels steady. Spine straight. Heart finally quiet. Outside. The city breathed. Cars moved. People laughed somewhere. And for the first time since the rain soaked my clothes on that driveway, I felt like the storm was behind me. 3 days passed after the hospital without another call. The silence itself felt like a verdict. I returned to routines that had once kept me alive. Morning drop-offs. Evening baths. emails stacked like bricks. Yet something had shifted. I was no longer bracing for the next blow. I was watching from a distance. Margaret did not call to apologize again. She called to negotiate. Her voice was flatter, stripped of theater. She asked if I could speak to the foundation twice. She asked if I knew any neurologists. She asked if I could talk to Nathan's employer about disability benefits. Each request ended the same way. I said no, or I redirected her to public resources. Boundaries became my language. Short sentences. No explanations. Nathan survived the surgery. That was the update I received through my lawyer. Not his mother. He survived. But he did not wake. Tubes breathed for him. Machines counted time. Doctors spoke in cautious phrases that left room for hope but offered none. Margaret moved into the hospital chair, sleeping upright, living on vending machine, coffee. The woman who once measured my worth in obedience now measured days in beeps. At work, I was offered the regional director role. The timing felt unreal. I accepted without celebration, then sat alone in my car and cried once, quietly, hands on the steering wheel. It was not joy. It was release. The work I had buried to survive was finally breathing again. Vanessa disappeared. Accounts closed. Numbers disconnected. Rumors traveled faster than facts. I did not chase her. She no longer mattered. What mattered was Lily. One night, Lily asked if Daddy was sick. I told her the truth, gently, that he had been hurt, that doctors were helping. She nodded, processing in the careful way children do, then asked if it was her fault. My chest tightened. I held her and said no until the word filled the room and pushed the fear out. Margaret tried one last time. She sent a letter, handwritten, shaking script. She wrote about tradition, about blood, about forgiveness. She wrote that families survive storms together. I read it once and filed it away, not for court, for memory, to remind myself how easily language can be used to excuse harm. The court finalized everything 2 weeks later. Full custody, clear terms, no contact except through counsel. When the judge read the order, my shoulders dropped an inch. Air moved through me differently. I did not visit the hospital again. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. My presence would not heal Nathan. It would only reopen a door I had closed to protect my child. On the drive home one evening, traffic slowed near the medical district. I saw Margaret across the street, pushing a wheelchair empty except for a folded blanket. She looked older than her years, smaller. I did not stop. I did not wave. I kept driving. At home, Lily slept with her cheek pressed to my arm. I watched her breathe and understood the quiet power of choosing oneself without becoming what hurt you. They thought they had broken me. What they handed me instead was distance, truth, and time. It was not revenge that carried me forward. It was restraint. Learned the hard way. I closed the door without slamming it and walked into a life that finally belonged to me alone. Quiet strength became my inheritance, and I chose to keep it forever onward. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, subscribe. This story isn't over. Not because there's more revenge coming, not because someone else will fall, but because stories like this don't end when the screen fades out. They continue in quiet mornings, in choices made without witnesses, in boundaries held when it would be easier to give in. If you've ever been told to be patient while you were being erased, if you've ever been asked to sacrifice again, just to keep the peace. If you've ever wondered whether choosing yourself made you selfish, this story was for you. Hit subscribe if you believe dignity matters more than approval. Like the video if you've learned that love without limits can become a cage, and share it with someone who needs to hear that walking away can be an act of courage, not cruelty. I'll be back with another story soon. Until then, take care of yourself, quietly, firmly,